What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of Dynasty Football here on Loaded Box Vids. Once again, I'm joined by my good buddy, Dylan Mazzola. So I'm going to start off. Dylan, how's it going, man?
I'm just happy to be here. I said last week, it's the same thing. It's, when talking football, it's a good day. So that's pretty much where I'm at.
Yeah, dude, you can never complain about it. But today we have our part one of our free agency frenzy going on for you guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the top 35 to top 40 free agents out there. We're going to kind of play guessing games on where we think they're going to end up and how that's going to affect their future fantasy value in these dynasty leagues. But before we get started, let's get loaded, because this is Loaded Box Vids.
I got water.
All right. But, so we're going to go ahead and get right on into it, and we're going to start off with the number one free agent, arguably, in the entire NFL, not for fantasy, but for real life, and that's going to be Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys, or should I say currently of the Dallas Cowboys. I will lead off by saying our prediction is that he's going to stay in Dallas. They're going to move around some money. They're going to figure out what it takes to get Dak to stay there this or next season, and hopefully for many seasons to come for Dallas. Dylan, what do you think that really does for his future fantasy value?
That offense is loaded. Even if they were to, let's say, cut Amari Cooper, Dak Prescott's still going to come back. Perfect health, obviously. He'll be a top 5 fantasy quarterback option again. If he stays there, not much will change. It's the same system. I mean, a couple moving parts. They're bad defensively. They're going to have to win games offensively. It's probably an ideal scenario for him to stay in Dallas.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, especially with CD Lamb still there, I'd be surprised if Michael Gallup doesn't return. I know you and I were talking offline the other day on how Amari Cooper could potentially be balled out, and they wouldn't really take a whole lot of cap issues along with that, because they are going to need to make some room for Dak. So that's definitely going to be one thing that's going to cause concern for his fantasy value if he loses Amari Cooper. Then again, he's still excellent by himself on the ground. Now, I don't know how that ankle injury, that gruesome ankle injury, is going to treat him moving forward. I would imagine he doesn't get on the field until he's 100% healthy again. But, Dallas came out this offseason. It's a priority for them to re-sign Dak for the future, and I think they're going to get it done. Unofficially, I do have a dark horse candidate on where he could end up. I don't actually think this. I don't think this is like the most likely. I definitely think Dallas is more likely. But I low-key could kind of see the Patriots making an offer to Dak because they need a quarterback. I'm pretty sure they're top 5 in terms of cap space right now. It kind of makes sense, the Patriots are kind of starting this rebuild, and who better to start a rebuild around than a young quarterback in Dak Prescott?
That's a good point. And one more thing to note on Dak. Before, people were complaining that he wanted too much money, whether you're a Cowboys fan or a Dynasty owner. I'm not sure how much money he'll genuinely command. I'm not saying he'll sign for pennies on the dollar, but that was a gruesome injury, as you pointed. And I don't know if teams might be a little scared by that, including the Cowboys, to lock him up long term.
Yeah, so we'll have to see what happens with him. But no matter what happens, if he's in Dallas, he is a top 5, top 6 dynasty quarterback. If he moves over to the Patriots, I do think his stock takes a bit of a dip. But I'm still going to put him, firmly in the top 7, top 8 guys if he ends up moving to the Patriots.
He's top 10 wherever he goes in the NFL. You can throw out Patriots, Jets, it doesn't matter. He'll retain, like you said, his value to rush on the ground. He's a decent quarterback. So
absolutely. And in my opinion, he's a really good, I don't want to say buy low candidate because people are starting to get back on the Dak Prescott train, but his value is arguably the lowest it's ever been, with the exception of right after that big gruesome injury, just because he doesn't have a contract right now. So if you're in need of a quarterback, or if you're in a super flex league and you need your second guy, or even if you need your first guy in Dak Prescott, I think he's going to rebound perfectly fine from this ankle injury. He's going to stay in Dallas, and he's going to pump out the top 5 numbers that we've come to expect from him.
But speaking of buy low candidates, one of the next quarterbacks we're going to talk about actually is a buy low candidate, and the other one you should probably not even look at him.
Well, while you're talking about the buy low quarterbacks, we'll move on to the next one, and that's going to be Jameis Winston currently of the New Orleans Saints. And our official prediction is that he's going to re-sign with the Saints, and he's probably going to be the starter for them.
I definitely see that. Even if people have them projected taking a quarterback late in the first round, this could be, Mikey and I talk about all the time, this could be a draft where like 4 or 5 quarterbacks are gone by like pick 10. So if you're the Saints, you're either trading up to get the guy you want, or you're getting, for lack of a better term, sloppy seconds. I don't want to knock any of the prospects, but by the time their pick rolls around in the latter half of the draft, 5 quarterbacks will be gone potentially. So you're picking the 6th best option. So at that point, do you waste? I don't want to say waste, but do you take a first round pick and stash them? And even if they do that, Winston will still start. So.
Yeah. And the cool thing with Jameis Winston is, while I hate him in real life because he doesn't win games in real life, he's going to throw just as many picks as he is touchdowns. I mean, we saw that. That was evident last year when he was still with the Bucs. But Jameis Winston is low-key a very good fantasy quarterback. As long as you don't have some sort of ridiculous penalties for interceptions in your league. Like if an interception is -2 or -3, something crazy like that, okay, then maybe we're not valuing Winston nearly as high. But Winston is this air raid kind of guy. You're going to give him Michael Thomas. You're going to give him Alvin Kamara. Emmanuel Sanders is still there. I'd be very surprised to see if the Saints. Well, exactly, and I think the Saints are going to go out and they're going to probably spend a top 3 or one of their first 3-round draft picks on a receiver, given how deep this receiving class is and how much lack of success they've had in the past with their draft picks recently. So I can see them going out, getting another weapon for Jameis. They actually just announced right before we hopped on this video that they're going to be moving on from Jared Cook. So maybe what's his face, Adam Troutman that they drafted.
Adam Troutman season.
Exactly. Maybe he steps in and he steps up. So you never know. But Jameis Winston is honestly one of my favorite buy low candidates in general for this offseason in Dynasty. You're definitely going to want to. Oh, yeah, and you're going to want to get him before he signs with the Saints, because as soon as he re-signs with the Saints, at the very least, we know it's going to be a training camp battle between him and Taysom Hill for 2021. And we kind of saw Taysom Hill looked good against really bad teams, but once he was in against actually decent defenses, he couldn't do anything. And the Saints know they're not.
How dare you mention him on this sacred video?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, but, I mean, we'll see. But Jameis Winston, if he does sign in or with the Saints, I should say, there's a good chance that he's going to be an immediate top 15 dynasty quarterback just because of the big fantasy upside that he does bring to the position.
Yeah, I agree. And there are probably another like 1 or 2 spots if he were to sign somewhere else where he would also have some fantasy value. So if you trade low for him, folks, don't worry. There is more than one spot. The Saints are more than ideal since he's been there, but Winston's decent enough fantasy wise where if he goes in a couple other spots, he could maybe win you some matchups. So. Oh,
absolutely. I mean, there are so many quarterback needy teams this offseason. If he doesn't re-sign with the Saints, he's going to find value somewhere. But either way, we'll move on to probably arguably the least most fantasy relevant guy that we're going to be going over in our 3-part video series. And I'm going to be highlighting Andy Dalton here. And the official prediction on him is don't waste your time. And what I mean by that is maybe he re-signs in Dallas. Maybe he goes somewhere where a quarterback is needed. I'm personally not banking on him going anywhere and starting. I think that at the very best, he's just going to be a backup quarterback somewhere, or maybe a team like, I don't know, I don't think he's actually going to go to the Jets, but maybe the Jets take him on and he becomes a mentor to whoever they draft at number 2 overall or something like that. Either way, Andy Dalton, yeah, I mean, he's 34 years old. His best days are far behind him. He didn't look particularly great in Dallas, even though he had some of the league's best weapons at his disposal. I mean, he's just one of those guys where I know everyone's looking for those buy low guys, especially at the quarterback position, but don't waste your time.
Yeah, he's going to be a backup probably, or he's going to sign to a team that has an injury-prone quarterback, but still you're just waiting for the player to get hurt at that point, so it's not worth wasting a roster spot and or assets to acquire him. So just on to the next one, Mikey.
Yeah, we'll move on from Andy Dalton, and we'll head into the running back position. So we got 2 running backs for you guys today. And the first one is arguably the biggest free agent on the running back market this offseason, and it's going to be Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. Our official predictions for him are he's going to land in either Green Bay, which he already is, or he's going to land in Arizona or Miami. So first take, what are your thoughts on that?
So 2 things about Aaron Jones. 1, I love him. 2, I think he might stay with the Packers, and the only reason is apparently Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if you read this, anyone listening. Apparently Aaron Rodgers doesn't know about his future with the Packers. Now I'm not gonna look too much into that. But the past couple seasons, if you've been following football, you know that Aaron Rodgers has been no stranger to say he is distasteful. And the reason I'm bringing him up is because the Packers neglected to draft another playmaker, and they drafted a quarterback who, if Aaron Rodgers stays in the Packers, won't even see the light of day for like 4 years. So my point is, if Rodgers technically left, let's say I'm throwing a theory out, like this year or next year, they might be more inclined to sign him because you want to help the rookie quarterback out and stack the running game for him and give him playmaking.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, I would love to see Aaron Jones re-sign in Green Bay, but after looking at the cap space and everything,
well, yeah, that's what I was going to get to. The cap space and then the new agent hire. It looks like he's on the way out.
Yeah, and for those of you watching that didn't know about the new agent, not too long ago, Aaron Jones hired a new agent, and typically what that means is that contract talks completely broke down with Green Bay. I mean, they were potentially talking about a contract extension all the way back at the beginning of the season. You know, Aaron Jones put up his smoke screens and was like, no, I'm not worried about it. We'll get it done. And here we are. The season's over for Green Bay, and they never got anything done. Meanwhile, they were signing some of their other studs. So given their cap room and what Aaron Jones is probably going to want, it makes you wonder if they're going to be able to retain him. Now, like I said, I would love for him to stay in Green Bay because we know that he's the clear cut, at the very least, the 1A of this backfield, and he would remain that 1A featured role for the next 1 to 3 years, I'd say. But the other part of me is saying that he's going to end up in Miami or Arizona. So Miami has some of the best cap space in all the league. Arizona is pretty well in the middle, but Miami is, I don't want to say they're rebuilding, but they're building up from where they are. I mean, clearly they're off on the right foot, but getting a truly elite guy in the running game to stack up with Tua. If they go out there in their 3rd overall pick and they take Sewell Panay at the offensive line, and then if they get Tua a receiver somewhere in the draft, I mean, adding those 2 guys and using your money on Aaron Jones, you got to think Miami would all of a sudden be a total force to be reckoned with on offense if Tua can put it together. So it makes me think that Miami might actually offer a ton of fantasy upside for Aaron Jones.
You made a good point with both those landing spots, which I also agree on. It doesn't stay because both those teams kind of use a running back tandem, and Aaron Jones would give you the elite option. But on both those teams, respectively, you would have Myles Gaskin, who's a receiving back and a change of pace back, and then on the Cardinals, you'd have Chase Edmonds. So Aaron Jones would pair very nicely with them, similar to how he did on the Packers already. So also the Packers do. I mean, they also have to sign the other running back. The only one that's tendered is the rookie they just drafted, AJ Dillon. So.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's definitely interesting to see what they're going to do in Green Bay. It's going to be a hell of a lot easier for them to keep Jamal Williams. I do think that if Aaron Rodgers decides to, come back to Green Bay, that will entice Aaron Jones a bit more to stay. Maybe he takes a tiny bit of a hometown deal with Green Bay to stay playing with Aaron Rodgers because clearly they have a lot of fun out there together. I mean, Aaron Rodgers loves targeting Aaron Jones out of the backfield. But before we move on, I want to briefly touch about his potential landing spot in Arizona too. I mean, as you mentioned, Kenyon Drake's not under contract anymore, so it's just Chase Edmonds. Aaron Jones could form pretty much the same tandem that he did in Green Bay with Jamal Williams, with Chase Edmonds in Arizona. And Aaron Jones is much more efficient on the goal line than Kenyon Drake. He is much more efficient in general, pretty much in every aspect of the game. I mean, imagine the read option with Aaron Jones and Kyler Murray on the field with DeAndre Hopkins out wide. Like, that could be a dream scenario, but either way, I mean, any of these 3 places are going to be great for his fantasy value. Arguably, as much as I would like to see him stay in Green Bay just so we can see the consistency, out of all 3 of these options, Green Bay might actually be the lowest ceiling, but safest floor kind of thing for his fantasy value. Before we move on, do you have any more thoughts on Aaron Jones?
No, just it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. And I think literally the Packers, I think if they re-sign Jamal Williams, that might be telling to like what you said if Aaron Jones is gone. And then also in the rare chance that, Aaron Rodgers says YOLO and leaves, then that also, opens up the door.
So before we move on to, I'm going to give you a running back position for Aaron Jones. So right now he is not on a contract. He will be a free agent as soon as the Super Bowl is over. Do you think that we can, without a contract at this moment in time, do you think we can treat him still as an RB1 in fantasy, or is his value kind of treading towards upper tier RB2 right
I think
now?
it is falling, but I think it's still an RB10. I was just thinking when you were asking that question, I already knew what you were going to say. So in my head, I was like Aaron Jones, top 10 running backs, and I was trying to list ones in front of him, and I couldn't name that many. I named a couple, like there's obvious ones like Christian McCaffrey, Barkley, both when healthy, Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott if the Cowboys regain, Nick Chubb. But okay, after that, it's kind of like, you know what I mean? Who else would you want? Like, some dynasty people may say Josh Jacobs, but I have Josh Jacobs. I talk to you all the time. As long as John Gruden's calling the shot, Jacobs is going to have 1 point 1 week and 30 the next week. So I think the latter half of the low tier RB1s and the high end RB2s are kind of more or less the same.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's about where I'd have Aaron Jones too, somewhere between the RB10 and RB12. I'm still treating him, especially in PPR leagues, as a low-end RB1. And he's a guy that I think you're going to be able to buy low while we're waiting for the contract talks to kind of even out. So if you have an Aaron Jones owner in your league that's kind of souring on him or is scared about where he's going to end up, he's going to end up in a good situation. He's going to ask for a lot of money, and no team's going to give him that money without expecting him to be their at least 70% share running back at this point, with the exception of Green Bay, of course, because we see how they use him. But anyway, we'll move on to the next guy. And next one, the only other running back we're going to go over today is going to be Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens. Official prediction is that he stays with the Baltimore Ravens. We talked about him briefly the other day in our mock draft when I took him in round 13 or 14. He was such a value. Oh, yeah, he was such a steal at the end of our mock draft there. But if he stays in Baltimore, what are the fantasy implications for him moving forward? Is he a guy that's worth rostering?
In Dynasty League, obviously, because Mark Ingram's gone now. So on paper, it's really just the Dobbins and Gus Edwards show. And there was times where it was inefficiency of Dobbins running, or the coaching staff didn't use him as much as you would think for, the touted rookie. Gus Edwards would get the load. So I don't think that's going to change. I think Dobbins may get an increased workload, but all indications prove and point towards Gus not getting less work, obviously, if not more, since Ingram's gone. So maybe in like redraft leagues, maybe not roster worthy, but still, if you have Dobbins, I think it would be a good like handcuff in any league if you can get him.
Yeah, I agree. Gus Edwards, in my opinion, him and J.K. Dobbins are going to offer pretty much the same rushing upside any given week. The big difference is that J.K. Dobbins is going to be on the field for third downs, and Gus Edwards typically won't be. I mean, his entire career, he only has 18 receptions to date, 0 receiving touchdowns, less than 200 yards. So he's clearly not a guy that you are highly coveting in PPR leagues. The main thing with Gus Edwards, if he stays in Baltimore, is that he's gonna cap J.K. Dobbins' upside. Like, we're not gonna see the workhorse in J.K. Dobbins that we all want to see while Gus Edwards is there. But with that being said, I mean, Gus Edwards, he's a good depth piece for your roster. You can plug him in a bye week. He might get a touchdown. He's gonna handle at least a handful of touches for you. Yeah. He's definitely not useless, but I don't exactly know how much you're gonna get for him in a trade unless you're like selling him to the J.K. Dobbins owner.
No, I wouldn't. The only way I would go out if you're a dynasty owner right now and you have only like 3 or 4 backs on your team, you want another one, and you see the guy has Gus Bus, you can throw out a low, like I don't know, like a 4th round pick or something, and then probably do the trade, and it just gives you a safety blanket, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, for sure. But that'll do it for the running backs for today. Oh, what's that? Sorry.
I said he's not a sexy option, but he's a safe option.
Yeah. Safe option for sure. But that'll do it for the running backs today. So as I mentioned, this is going to be a 3-part series. We've got about 35 to 40 total guys for you. We're kind of splitting up each video so that there's a little bit of everything in there. Didn't want to just focus one episode on QBs, running backs, wide receivers, whatever. But we're going to go ahead and get into the receivers here. And the first one, again, the biggest free agent at this position. We'll start off with that, and that's going to be Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's only 25 years old. He's had 355 receptions to date. He has over 3,500 receiving yards to date, and he's found the end zone 24 times in his career. Chris Godwin is money. Exactly. He's absolute money, and he's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah, that's why
so before
costs a lot.
Well, exactly. So before I ask you your thoughts, our official predictions are he's either going to stay in Tampa Bay, or he's going to go to a team with a lot of cap space in Cincinnati, Miami, or Washington. I know I would typically like to only predict a player to land in 2 or 3 spots, but a guy like Chris Godwin, almost any offense in the entire National Football League could use a guy like Chris Godwin, but these 4 places seem to make the most sense given his situation and how much money he's going to cost. So Chris Godwin for you, is he a top 15 dynasty receiver for you?
Well, yeah, probably. It also depends upon where he goes. Like, let's say in theory he signs with the Jets compared to the Dolphins or something. You know, obviously it's somewhat of an uptick or a downtick in volume, but I think he kind of got soured on this year because he was hurt and he dropped some passes and wasn't putting up big numbers. But you have to realize, Tampa Bay, not Tampa Bay, because, Tom Brady's there now. It was loaded. I mean, literally, even Tyler Johnson's looking like a future stud, and he's a rookie. So it's like Chris Godwin had to literally fight, whereas, last year it was just him and Mike Evans. So, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't, like the input of Gronk, Fournette, Tyler Johnson took shares away. Also his injury. So I think he might – I think he will go up in value because wherever he signs, if it's not in Tampa, he's probably going to be their best receiver, and worst case scenario, the second best. But if they're paying that much money for a guy like that, they're paying him to be the wide receiver 1. So he's going to go to any team that you just named, or any team, because like you said, I think all teams in the NFL are probably thinking, if I cut player A and B, could we afford Chris Godwin?
Yeah, Godwin's definitely going to be a total game changer on any roster. I'm personally considering him around that 13 to 16 range in terms of dynasty wide receivers because, again, he's only 25 years old. The age of decline for fantasy receivers isn't until 30, which means we very well may have not even seen Chris Godwin enter his prime yet. He's incredibly versatile. Obviously, he does run a lot more of his routes out of the slot, but he is a guy that can kind of run wherever on the field, and he's going to excel wherever he is on the field. I would argue that him staying in Tampa Bay, honestly, would be the worst thing for his fantasy value, and that's because Tom Brady spreads the ball around. Mike Evans is the number 1 red zone target. Gronk is still there. Well, for now at least. We're going to go over him a little bit later.
Howard's coming back next year.
O.J. Howard's coming back. The rookie Tyler Johnson's there. I'm sure they're going to try to re-sign Antonio Brown. I mean, this is an offense where everyone is going to feast, but only one person a week, maybe two people a week.
The fastest white boy alive.
Exactly. So, I mean, Chris Godwin, his fantasy value, in my opinion, in Tampa Bay is probably going to be the worst thing for him. Now, if he does stay in Tampa Bay, admittedly, he'll probably fall in my rankings, probably to maybe wide receiver 17 to 20 range, because I am scared that he does stay in Tampa Bay. However, going anywhere else, as you mentioned before, if he goes somewhere, he's going to get paid, and he's going to get paid to play. Personally, my favorite landing spot, even though they have no idea what they're doing at quarterback right now, I'd really like to see him in Washington for his fantasy value. Imagine him with Terry McLaurin.
The Eagles fan. No.
But for fantasy, you got to admit, having Terry McLaurin on the field with him, I mean, it could literally be, as effective as Chris Godwin was when it was mainly just him and Mike Evans last year. That's what I could see doing with Terry McLaurin if they can at least minorly figure out the quarterback position. And if he goes to Washington before they figure out a quarterback position, that's a good buy low. time for Chris Godwin because people will be freaking out completely as to why he ended up there without a quarterback. But situations, especially for receivers, change so quick.
I think he's going to stay in Florida, but just not the same Florida team.
So you think in Miami?
Possibly, because Miami, you have to think, you have Devontae Parker, who's a late bloomer. He's already like 27 or 28. I'm not sure his contract situation. Preston Williams, who I'm very high on, and you know that, but the poor guy has gotten really hurt the past 2 years in a row, and he was also an undrafted free agent. So, I mean, it's like if they cut ties with him eventually, they're not losing any capital on that. Then you have my boy, Mike Gesicki, and then the running game is left to But you could argue, rather than how you talked earlier about them signing Jones, you could argue them signing Chris Godwin would also be just as good because it would give Tua an elite receiver trio, essentially, when they're all healthy of Parker, Godwin, and Williams. And I don't think that would hamper him as much as it would in Tampa. Plus, they could also draft a running back and just rely on my guy and your guy, Myles Gaskins, and running back they drafted. So I think Miami's a sexy pick. And I think Jets fans are probably going to be happy for me to say this, but it wouldn't be terrible about the Jets. I know Jets are linked to him and Allen Robinson, who we'll talk about later, but they've, it's highly rumored because Jets have money to throw around. And if they get a quarterback at second overall, that might be a sexy option for a receiver to play with Justin Fields or Zach Wilson.
Oh, for sure. Well, since you brought him up and you brought up the Jets, we'll move on over to Allen Robinson, and our official predictions with him are going to be the Jets, the Jaguars, and even the Tennessee Titans.
Titans, that's a good one.
Yeah. You and I both know that Allen Robinson is a baller. You know better than anyone how much I hyped up Allen Robinson. I said he was going to be a top 5 receiver this year. I think he was like number 6 or 7 overall, so I was pretty damn close on him. He's only 28 years old, and he's in the middle of his prime. I forget what it was, but on PFF, I think it was like only 60 to 65% of the balls throughout his entire career have been deemed catchable by PFF, which means that 35 to 40% of the balls ever thrown to Allen Robinson were just not even catchable balls. This guy has played with Mitch Trubisky. He's played with Nick Foles. He's played with Blake Bortles. Exactly. I mean, he's never had a good quarterback thrown to him. So one of the reasons why I picked Tennessee as my main prediction is because Ryan Tannehill has broken out. They're going to be looking for a guy opposite of A.J. Brown because they're likely going to lose Corey Davis in free agency. Tennessee is not the richest team out there, but I do think that they could afford Allen Robinson, and I do think that he's going to want to go somewhere with good quarterback play. Now, on the other side, if he wants the best of both worlds and he wants a lot of money and at least upside quarterback play, that's what leads me to think that he could end up with the Jets or the Jaguars, because at that point, he's either going to have Trevor Lawrence thrown to him or Justin Fields or Zach Wilson. So, at one point, Allen Robinson's going to have to take a look and say, hey, do I want more money? Do I want a bona fide quarterback? Do I want to go with the team? Do I want to try for a ring? I don't know. But your thoughts on Allen Robinson, because we both know, everyone knows he's not re-signing with the Chicago Bears.
No, I think he's probably already sold his apartment or house at this point. He's probably running away from the Bears. You talked about it. You hit everything I was going to say. The man, it's going to be one of those guys when you're older and like 40, you're going to like think back to like the receivers and players who got cheated, and he's going to be one of those guys that you're like, damn. Unless he makes a good decision right now in free agency, because like you said, his quarterback play has been terrible. He's elite receiver every year the past several years. He was elite ever since he got in the NFL. He just hurt himself and then fell off, which is why the Bears landed him. But landing spot-wise, anywhere you just name's better. Like, even if the Jets keep Sam Darnold, that's better than the other 3 quarterbacks you named. So either way, literally – Allen can go to – sorry if you're a Bears fan. He can go to like half the other teams and have better value than what he did on the Bears. Just because
I think no matter where Allen Robinson's going to go, he's going to factor in as the wide receiver 1. I don't think he's going to be expected to do as much as he was in Chicago, but at the same time, I think he's going to be just as, if not more productive than he was in Chicago, because he's going to have a lot of that slack taken off of him. So I'm very excited to see where Allen Robinson goes. without a contract, I'm treating him as a wide receiver 1 right now. I'm not going to say he's a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. Even this time last year, I wasn't necessarily saying he was top 5 for dynasty. But I would put him in the top 12 for dynasty, probably in that 9 to 12 overall range. I'm incredibly high on him. He's got another 2 to 4 years left before he starts like really declining. And whatever his contract is, whether it's a 2-year, a 4-year, a 5-year contract, I think that's going to be telling, and especially where he ends up. So Allen Robinson's definitely a guy that I like. His fantasy value, both as a free agent and potentially wherever he's going to sign, as long as it's not the Chicago Bears.
No, dude, not the Bears. I'm just going to say it here. I think it's going to be the Jets, and I think the Jets either trade or draft a tight end, and then whoever their quarterback is, you're inputting tight end A, and then Allen Robinson with Denzel Mims and Mr. Ageless Wonder. Who is it? Crowder or Perryman? Which one's older over there?
Crowder,
yeah. So, I mean, it's not bad. So, either way.
Yeah, so we'll see. So hopefully Jets fans will get a present in Allen Robinson, arguably.
You're a Bears fan. Sorry you had to listen to this. Your team's going to suck.
Yeah, I feel bad for them. But, oh well, moving on to another receiver. We're going to talk about Will Fuller of the Houston Texans. He's 27 years old, still has a lot of ball to play. Obviously, Will Fuller, the first thing I think of when I hear the name Will Fuller is injuries, because that seems to be what happens to him every single year.
Well, now it's
but
drugs.
Our official predictions now it's performing enhancing drugs, and I'm pretty sure his suspension is going to leak into the 2021 season, either the very first game or the second game of wherever he plays. Yeah. So that's going to be something to monitor. Yeah. So the official prediction, I don't think he's going to end up back in Houston. I think you and I are on the same boat with that one. So it's going to come down to probably the main 4 teams are going to be Jacksonville. Again, they have the most money. They have Trevor Lawrence coming in. Maybe they want to get him a deep threat in Will Fuller. So that would be kind of interesting. Then the other 3 is going to be the New England Patriots, the Washington football team, or the Green Bay Packers. In your opinion, out of these 4, where would his dynasty value have the most upside?
Well, I was gonna make a joke, but also I guess Washington, because they've never been ones to shy away from signing players with interesting past. I guess I'll put it politely. So I think he goes to Washington, by the way. But I also think out of those, that would probably not hurt his dynasty value, because I think the Jags, people are kind of sleeping on the receivers they already have there for dynasty purposes in real life. Like, it's Trevor Lawrence is not walking into like a barren wasteland like Sam Darnold did. Like, DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault are still there. Like, it's not terrible. It could be a lot worse.
Yeah, for sure.
Packers, maybe, but also he'd be playing second fiddle to Devontae Adams. And Alan Lazard in the playoffs when he got healthy again, the end of the year looked good. And also the rise of Big Bob. Not sure if he can sustain that. So I think the Washington football team make the most sense, because who else is on their team besides Scary Terry and Antonio Gibson for offense? Logan Thomas, 29-year-old one-hit wonder possibly? Like, it makes sense for Will Fuller to go there, both for dynasty and
I mean, and they have Gandy Golden, and then what's his face, Kelvin Harmon, I think. I could be completely wrong on that, but I vaguely remember he's there, and he just got hurt at the beginning of this year. But nonetheless, I mean, you're right. Washington does need a ton of help. Obviously, quarterback is probably going to be their main thing to address, but hey, I mean, if they're in the running to get Chris Godwin, they can definitely be in the running to get Will Fuller. Will Fuller's a great guy to stretch down the field. Oh, yeah, he's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper, and arguably Will Fuller would open up more space for Scary Terry, because Will Fuller's going to be stretching the field more often than not. So I do like that a lot. I do really like the idea of him potentially ending up in Green Bay, especially if Aaron Rodgers stays there. I know at the trade deadline this past year, Will Fuller was rumored to be potentially on his way to Green Bay, but that never happened. So Green Bay fans, if you're watching this, let us know down in the comments if you would be pumped or not if Will Fuller would show up in Green Bay. But in terms of dynasty value, I'm treating him as a very high upside, low-end wide receiver 3, maybe even high-end wide receiver 4. I'm scared of his injuries. It sucks that he's going to be out for the first 1 to 2 games of the season. I'm not exactly sure how much. He's going to be finding his stride with a new team. he was the number one option in Houston after DeAndre Hopkins left, but Will Fuller is going to go somewhere and just be that vertical threat as a number 2 or even number 3 option, depending on which team he lands in. So he's not a guy that I'm excited to have, or necessarily a guy I would be excited to grab this offseason.
Buy low guy,
he's a decent enough buy low guy. There's still value there, but I wouldn't trust him as one of your starting receivers to enter 2021.
I have no Will Fuller shares, if that lets anybody listening know. I don't also trust in him. It's just with the injuries he's had, not knocking him, like he's the kind of guy, Mikey was saying earlier, the age fall off is like 30. He's the kind of guy that could fall off by like 29. It's not knocking him. It's just like he's been hurt almost every single year. So I don't know how much like his body has left. Similar, literally, as an Eagles fan, I can compare him to Deshaun Jackson. Like, will Fuller have a same career towards the end of D Jackson's career, as we all know? Anyone got sucked into the he's still fast and old thing? Well, no, he plays like 8 seconds and then dies. So is Will Fuller on track to do that as well, is what I'm saying. And if you're looking at it from a dynasty perspective, he is already 27. So how many more years you're going to squeeze out of him with his injury past?
Yeah, that's a good comparison. His injuries are always cause for concern, and no matter where he goes, it's not like that's going to change. But we'll move on. We've got 2 more receivers to go over today, and the next one is going to be a guy that's quite the opposite of Will Fuller in terms of play style. And we're going to go over Curtis Samuel, my guy from the Carolina Panthers. He's only 25 years old, and he kind of does it all. With Christian McCaffrey going down this year, Curtis Samuel took a handful of snaps out of the backfield each game. They ran screens for him. He pretty much ran every single route in the route tree, and he looked pretty damn good doing it. Admittedly, he's the wide receiver 3 on the Carolina Panthers behind both DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. But there's a chance that he leaves Carolina in free agency. Our official predictions for Curtis Samuel would either be stay in Carolina, end up with the New England Patriots, or end up down there in Miami with the Dolphins as a scapegoat kind of gadget player for Tua Tagovailoa. I think I said his name right, and I'm amped about that.
You did?
But for fantasy purposes, where's your dream spot for Curtis Samuel, and what kind of value would he have?
I think he's going to be good, like at the team that loses the sweepstake for like the bigger guys we just named, like the Allen Robinson and the Chris Godwin, and we'll talk about him later. Kenny Golladay as well as another guy who's a big name agent. So I think whatever team doesn't name them. I was even thinking just now when you're naming teams, I think Curtis Samuel might have fantasy value on the Packers, depending upon if Aaron Rodgers
I can see it
there.
I could see it, especially if they end up letting Aaron Jones walk, because Curtis Samuel could be a really good threat to have rotating in and out of the backfield as well.
Yeah, in theory, if you sign Curtis Samuel, they could just roll with A.J. Dillon, Curtis Samuel, and then draft or sign a low-tier running back.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to say Packers or Dolphins. I think that makes the most sense for fantasy dynasty value. And in terms of where I rank him on the dynasty scale, I'm not sure because this year he exploded. I would say around the same as where you ranked Will Fuller, just because Samuel is younger and less injury prone. And if he goes to a good landing spot, his value will shoot up.
Yeah, I kind of consider him as a low-end wide receiver 3 too. Anyone who goes out and gets him in free agency, they're going to want to use him. Obviously, you don't get a guy in free agency that you don't want to use, especially a guy like Curtis Samuel, who I think will take home a bit more money than we're all expecting this off season. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I severely hope, for my own selfish reasons, that he stays in Carolina. He's an awesome player to have. Not necessarily a guy that I'd go out of my way to get in fantasy this off season, with the question marks looming on where he's going to end up playing. But I think no matter where he does end up playing, he is a serviceable option at the flex. I'd consider him a low-end wide receiver 3, high-end wide receiver 4. And, he's an exciting option. So Curtis Samuel's definitely a guy to look out for on free agency this year. But we got one more wide receiver to go over before we move into our tight ends of the day, and that's going to be Antonio Brown of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dylan, tell me if you feel any different, but my prediction on this is that he's going to re-sign in Tampa Bay because he just wants to play with Tom Brady.
Yep, I think Antonio is jealous of the video of Tom's kid a couple years ago, so he wants to stay there. Relax.
Oh my gosh!
I think he stays there. If anything, he might even if they win. I was gonna say the cup. My brain's in hockey mode. If they win the Super Bowl, there's a chance he might even retire.
I don't think he would retire. I don't think Antonio Brown's only.
I don't think he will. I'm saying, but you could at least argue that's plausible because of his age, and he goes out like a champ on his terms. But I think he'll definitely stay there. The only reason he doesn't stay there is if Bruce Arians and/or Tom Brady doesn't want him there next year. But yeah.
Yeah, and Tom Brady is most definitely going to want him there next year. Now, this is assuming that Tom Brady does stay and doesn't retire after this year, but he is technically under contract until the end of next year. I don't think he's going to retire whether he wins or loses the Super Bowl, but
no.
Antonio Brown, he has kept his nose clean since he's been in Tampa, but obviously there's still a lot of problems that follow him around, a lot of legal troubles that follow him around. I think it's going to be very hard for him to get a contract pretty much anywhere else in the NFL, despite him being a really, really awesome player on the field at age 33. So I do think that he's going to take whatever money Tampa Bay is going to give him. He's probably going to get just another 1 to 2 year contract with them. What happens by the time he's 35, I guess we'll see what happens. But honestly, in terms of dynasty, he's not a guy that you're going to want long term because you are only going to get 1 or 2 more years out of him where you can legitimately plug him into your lineup almost every week. But for the immediate future in 2021, I would treat him as a mid to low end wide receiver too, just because Tom Brady does love him. If Chris Godwin ends up leaving in free agency, which there's a pretty decent chance that happens, Antonio Brown's essentially going to take over the middle of the field for that team. And I mean, he could catch 8 to 12 balls every single game if Chris Godwin isn't there. So the sky's the limit for the short term of Antonio Brown. Like I said, dynasty longevity, no idea whatsoever. But the short term, if you are a contender in your dynasty league, I absolutely think that Antonio Brown's worth the risk right now.
I agree. I was actually going to add the point, but you added it for me. I'm glad. If Chris Godwin leaves and his AB's value obviously skyrockets, if they all stay, it stays around the same. He's like a flex play, a very, very safe flex play with high upside. But if Godwin leaves, then he's a wide receiver 2 territory. So definitely, if you're like Mikey was saying, if you're a team that wants to win and need a wide receiver 2, low end 2, or a 3 or a flex, definitely go try to get Mr. AB.
Yeah, and it definitely comes with risks. As I said, he's still going through legal issues. Yeah, I mean, God only knows what's going to happen this offseason or what he's going to go through or what else he's going to do potentially. I'm rooting for the guy personally. But, yeah, so it's a risk-reward kind of short-term pick, but he's a good guy to go after if you're a contender. And if you're a contender, chances are you either have a tight end or you're going to need a tight end if you want to be a true contender. So we're going to move on to those guys. And the top one that we're going to go over today is Hunter Henry of the Los Angeles Chargers. He's only 27 years old, which is a very good age for tight ends. He's just entering his prime now. The official predictions for him is to stay with the Chargers, which I personally think is the most likely thing. Or he could end up in New England or Cincinnati, 2 teams that have cap space, 2 teams that need tight ends very badly. For the sake of this, I'm going to assume that he stays with the Chargers and stays with Justin Herbert, with Keenan Allen, all those guys. Hunter Henry, even though he doesn't have a contract right now, he's considered around the dynasty 8 or 9. It's about where I'd put him. Is that what you'd say as well?
Yeah, I would say I was going to say top 10, but towards the bottom half, so like 7 to 10. Yeah. And about the Patriots thing, I do not see that unless the Patriots land Dak or they do something crazy. There's no appeal there. Yeah, they can throw money at him, but the Chargers aren't poor, and they'll probably pay him market value. And also, if you're Hunter Henry, I'm staying with the hot hand of Justin freaking Herbert. That dude was like record breaking his first year in the NFL. Like I would stay there. New coach too.
Yeah. I do think that if Cincinnati offers more money than LA, I could see him in Cincinnati. They don't have a legitimate tight end. When CJ Uzoma, or before he went down with injury, I think it was him, or I don't know. Whoever Cincinnati was using as their
Drew Sample.
Yeah, and sample. But either way, Joe Burrow, he likes targeting the tight end. Just look at what he did back in LSU with Thaddeus Moss. He turned him into a household name at LSU. I think that Cincinnati would be incredibly smart to get a guy like Hunter Henry, because not only does he give Joe Burrow an option to throw to, but Hunter Henry's a half-decent blocker too. And obviously they're going to want to make sure that they get a really good offensive line built up for Joe Burrow. Hunter Henry kind of seems like the best of both worlds. Cincinnati's top 5 in terms of having salary cap for 2021. It kind of seems like the stars are lining up for them to sign a guy like Hunter Henry. So if he doesn't stay with the Chargers, I would really like to see him end up in Cincinnati. If he's in either of these places, I think his dynasty value is largely the same, somewhere in that 7 to 9 overall tight end range. If he goes to the Patriots, I'm probably kicking him down to my number 10, if not just outside of the top 10, because you don't know what's going on with that team. But yeah, any final thoughts on Hunter Henry?
No, just same as you. If he stays in Charger land, or if he goes to Joe Burrow land, it's the same, more or less, like both promising futures in terms of quarterbacks. No other tight ends on the roster to threaten them. Patriots wouldn't really make sense. That would definitely dip his value down. I think Chargers, because why wouldn't you want to stay with the better quarterback of the class?
Yeah, no, I agree.
I'm not going to cause controversy. Burrow got hurt. I don't know how he's going to look.
Yeah. Well, either way, Hunter Henry probably just going to take wherever gives him the most money, because I don't think there's a lot of legitimate contenders out there. They're going to be in the market for a high-end tight end like Hunter Henry. So I think he's just going to take whatever money he can get.
Cardinals? They have Dan Arnold.
Cardinals could use him. Well, I think Dan Arnold's actually a free agent this year too, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe we'll put him in a later video.
I might have some brainstorm on the video right now. The Cardinals, Dark Horse or Hunter Henry. That'd be good upside. Kyler Murray to Hunter Henry is a pretty attractive appeal.
That would be really good upside. And Arizona, they're middle of the pack in terms of salary cap, so I think they could do it. I personally think they have bigger fish to fry than spending the money on a tight end, but that would be an exciting signing there. So either way, Hunter Henry going forward, even though he doesn't have a contract right now, I'd still treat him as that low-end tight end 1, mid to low-end tight end 1, I should say, and his value is going to remain largely unchanged moving forward. And the last guy that we're going to go over today is actually going to be Rob Gronkowski of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dylan, I think I could speak for both of us when I say it's either going to be Tampa Bay or nothing. He's going to play with Tom Brady, or he's not going to play at all. I think he's made that very apparent, and he enjoys playing in Tampa Bay. I think he wants to come back to Tampa Bay. He already announced, but that's assuming that Tom Brady's still going to be there, which he should be. Any thoughts on him whatsoever besides him being Gronk in Tampa Bay?
He's staying in Tampa. He's a good buy. I'm weird saying buy low, but he's still not getting credit. I feel like in value. I tried trading him in one of my leagues and no one wanted him, and I don't understand why, because he was putting up decent tight end numbers, especially towards the end of the year. But no, he's gonna stay in Tampa. The man literally talked himself out of getting traded to the Lions. He was gonna get traded to the Lions in real life, called them and said I retire, and then they revoked the trade. So if that doesn't,
that was pretty wild. I forgot all about that.
Yes, he was briefly aligned.
That was pretty wild.
So
that was pretty wild.
He's staying in Tampa Bay. It's a good tight end to get, by the way. If you need one and don't want to pay a premium for a Kelsey or someone of that nature, I would advise getting a Gronk.
Yeah, and like we were saying earlier, if Chris Godwin leaves, it's going to open up more targets in the middle of the field, and not only is Antonio Brown going to be a beneficiary of that, but Gronk is going to be a beneficiary of that. Do I see him having more than 4 or 5 catches in any game, really?
No.
Not really. But Gronk he's a pretty safe bet to see 3 to 4 receptions each game, maybe 40 to 50 yards, and he's as good a bet as anyone in Tampa Bay, with the exception of maybe Mike Evans, to find the end zone in any given game. So Gronk is going to be a very safe low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2 with weekly touchdown upside. In terms of Dynasty, I do think that Rob Gronkowski is only going to play 1, maybe 2 more seasons in the NFL. So if you're not contending, I would sell him. Even if your profit is minimal, I would sell him while you can, because this time next year, I don't think he's going to have any value.
I agree with that.
But cool. So that's going to do it for us here today on the part 1 of free agency frenzy, I guess we'll call it. We only went over our 12 guys today. We've got more quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends for you guys coming out over the next couple of weeks in parts 2 and part 3. If you didn't see last week's video, feel free to go back into our channel and look for that. We did a startup mock draft, 15 rounds. It was me and Dylan. We hammered it out. Admittedly, it's a pretty long video. It's an hour long, but we think it's definitely worth it. A lot of cool information in there. And, we just had a lot of fun with it. It was our first video of the channel. We did what we could. We had a good time. And Dylan, I don't know about you, but I had a really good time here today too.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's always fun talking football. So I'm happy.
Absolutely. But feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for tuning in for Loaded Box Vids. For myself, for Dylan, and for Loaded Box, make sure you're following everyone on Twitter at Loaded Box, at Dylan Mazzola, and at FF_Mikey10. And we will see you guys next week for part 2 of this video series.